All right, welcome back, students, to part 26 of our Masterclass Explainer. I'm Harshal, your lead instructor, and today we are going to decode the final groups of ICD-10 PCS root operations. I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through these last few crucial classifications. But real quick, before we jump in, if you are enjoying this lesson, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel and share it with friends for this free course on Decode Healthcare with Harshal. Okay. Let's dive into this. So here is our syllabus for today. We'll do a quick recap and then deep dive into examination procedures, other repairs, and finally, other objectives. All right, Section 1, a quick intro and recap of our device root operations. If you recall from Part 25, we covered operations that always involve a device, like insertion and change. Moving right along to Section 2, let's get into our first new category for today, Group 7, Examination Procedures.
Let's kick things off with inspection, which is character J. The definition here is straight to the point, right? It's simply visually and/or manually exploring a body part. You use this when the absolute sole objective of the procedure is just examination, nothing else.
Take a look at this diagnostic arthroscopy of the knee. It's a perfect illustration of this concept. You can see the camera scope entering the knee joint for visual exploration. Manual exploration, on the other hand, is exactly what it sounds like. Direct feeling or palpation, maybe during something like an exploratory laparotomy. Now, here's a massive coding trap you've got to watch out for. What happens if a procedure, like, say, a colonoscopy, is discontinued before another root operation actually happens? Maybe the scope only makes it to the sigmoid colon and they have to pull the plug. Well, it defaults to inspection. Since the planned definitive procedure didn't happen, we just code the examination that actually occurred. Next up, we have MAP, which is character K. Now, mapping represents a very, very narrow range of procedures. It's totally focused on locating the route of electrical impulses or specific functional areas in the body. In fact, you're really only going to use mapping for two specific body systems. It applies exclusively to the central nervous system, think cortical mapping of the brain, and the heart's conduction mechanism, which you can see mapped out here through the sinoatrial node and Purkinje fibers. A common scenario would be intraoperative cardiac mapping during open heart surgery. Okay, moving into Section 3, Group 8, Other Repair Operations. First up in this group is control, character 3. Control is exclusively for stopping or attempting to stop post-procedural or other acute bleeding. One super important thing to note, the site of the bleeding here is coded to a general anatomical region, not a super granular specific body part. A classic example here is silver nitrate cautery for a nosebleed, or epistaxis. You can clearly see the damaged blood vessels in the nasal cavity mapped out right here. Other times you'd use this would be for controlling post-prostatectomy hemorrhage or maybe a bleeding duodenal ulcer. But wait, here is the golden rule for control, and it's all about knowing when not to use it. If you have to perform a more definitive operation, like an excision, extraction, or resection, to actually stop that bleeding, you code that definitive root operation instead. You do not code control in that scenario. Moving on to repair, character Q. Repair is defined as restoring to the extent possible a body part to its normal anatomic structure and function. Honestly, just think of this as your not elsewhere classified or your catch-all root operation for fixing things. So, you only default to repair when the method used doesn't fit the definition of literally any other root operation. So things like suturing up a blunt force laceration, performing a herniorrhaphy, or a colostomy takedown, those all fall squarely into repair. Why? Because they don't involve extracting tissue, bypassing vessels, or inserting devices. All right, Section 4, Group 9, Specific Objectives. First in this final group is fusion, character G. This means joining together portions of an articular body part to make it completely immobile. Fusion procedures are strictly performed on joints, joining them together using a fixation device, a bone graft, things like that. Spinal fusion is your prime example here. Check out the interbody fusion devices visible on this X-ray. What's really fascinating here is how heavily we rely on qualifiers to specify exactly what is going on. We use them to say, for instance, whether an anterior or posterior column of the spine is fused, and even whether the surgical approach itself was anterior or posterior. Next is alteration, character 0. Alteration is modifying the natural anatomic structure of a body part without affecting its function. Listen closely because alteration has one strict, non-negotiable purpose. It is coded for all procedures performed solely to improve appearance. Because surgeries can easily blur the line between medical and cosmetic, you absolutely must have diagnostic confirmation that a procedure like a facelift, breast augmentation, or liposuction was done strictly for appearance before using the alteration code. If it's for a medical condition, you'd be looking at a different root operation entirely, like repair or extraction. And finally, we arrive at the very last root operation, creation, character 4. Creation is used for a super narrow range of procedures. It involves putting in or on biological or synthetic material to actually form a new body part. In practice, this is specifically used for gender reassignment surgeries, like the creation of a vagina in a male, and corrective procedures for individuals with congenital anomalies. And just like that, Section 5. A quick summary and a teaser for Part 27. We made it through all 31 root operations. You've absolutely nailed the objectives, but what happens when we look at how the physician actually reached the surgical site? Well, in Part 27, we are going to cover Character 5 approaches. We'll be breaking down open, percutaneous, and endoscopic methods. If you are enjoying this lesson, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel and share it with friends for this free course on Decode Healthcare with Harshal. Before you click away, ask yourself this. If a surgeon inspects a joint, but midway through decides to fuse it, which root operation truly tells the story of that surgery? Keep mastering these nuances, and I will see you in the next explainer.